You said no to someone, and now you cannot stop thinking about it. Maybe your stomach feels tight. Maybe you keep replaying the conversation in your head, wondering if you were too harsh, too cold, too selfish. You did nothing wrong, and yet guilt is sitting heavy in your chest. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. This happens to a lot of people, more often than you might think. And it does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means you are someone who cares about others. It means you have a heart that pays attention to how your words affect people. That is not a weakness. That is actually a form of emotional awareness. But here's where it gets tricky. Just because you feel guilty does not mean you did something wrong. Feelings are real, but they are not always accurate. They tell us something is happening inside of us. They do not always tell us the truth about what we did or who we are.
Let me explain why this happens. When you grow up around people who expect you to always be available, always agreeable, always putting their needs first, something interesting happens in your mind. You start to believe that saying yes is normal and saying no is a problem. You learn, without anyone teaching you directly, that keeping others comfortable is your job. When you do not do that job, even for good reasons, your brain sends you a warning signal. That signal feels like guilt. But here's what that signal really means. It does not mean you made a mistake. It means you did something unfamiliar. Your brain noticed that you stepped outside of a pattern, and it is trying to pull you back into what feels safe. Guilt, in this case, is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that you are changing. Think about it this way. Imagine someone who grew up in a home where showing emotions was not allowed. If that person starts crying one day, they might feel ashamed, even if crying is completely natural and healthy. The shame does not mean they are doing something bad. It means they are doing something different from what they were trained to do. The same thing happens with saying no. You might have been trained, without realizing it, to believe that good people always say yes. So when you say no, your brain reacts as if you broke a rule. But you did not break a rule. You made a decision based on your own needs, your own limits, your own understanding of what is right for you. And that's allowed. Let us take a moment to really sit with that idea. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to choose rest over obligation. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to say, I cannot do this right now, and mean it. None of that makes you unkind. None of that makes you difficult. It makes you human. Now, I want to shift the way we think about this guilt for a moment. Instead of seeing it as proof that you are a bad person, consider this. The guilt might actually be proof that you are becoming a healthier person. It might mean you are starting to recognize that your needs matter. It might mean you are finally standing up for yourself after a long time of staying quiet. Growth often feels uncomfortable. When you stretch a muscle for the first time in a while, it aches. That does not mean you hurt yourself. It means you are getting stronger. Emotional growth works the same way. When you start setting boundaries, saying no, putting yourself first in healthy ways, it can feel strange at first. It can feel wrong. But feeling wrong is not the same as being wrong. There is a difference between guilt that points to real harm and guilt that points to personal growth. Real guilt shows up when you have actually hurt someone, when you have acted against your values, when you have done something that you genuinely believe was wrong. That kind of guilt deserves your attention. It helps you repair, apologize, and do better next time. But the guilt we're talking about today is different. This guilt shows up even when you have done nothing wrong. It shows up when you simply chose yourself. It shows up when you said, I do not have the energy for this, or I need to take care of myself right now. That is not guilt pointing to a mistake. That is guilt pointing to an old pattern that no longer fits your life. One thing that can be helpful to notice is where this guilt comes from in the first place. Think back to the people who raised you, the friends you had when you were younger, the environments you spent time in. Were you praised for being helpful, agreeable, easy? Were you criticized when you expressed needs or set limits? Did someone in your life react badly when you said no, making you feel like you had done something terrible? If any of that sounds familiar, it makes perfect sense that guilt follows you now. You were taught again and again that your needs came second. You were taught that saying no meant conflict, disappointment, rejection. Of course, your brain learned to avoid that. Of course, it tries to warn you when you go against the pattern. But you are older now. You can decide which patterns serve you and which ones do not. You can notice the guilt without letting it control you. You can say, I see you, but I do not agree with you. There is another thing worth noticing. Often, the people who feel the most guilt about saying no are the same people who say yes to almost everything. If you are constantly giving, constantly available, constantly sacrificing your own comfort for others, it is natural that the first time you stop, it feels like a big deal. But think about how rare your no actually is. For most people who struggle with this, saying no is not a habit, it is an exception. If you are someone who says yes 90% of the time and you said no once, you are not becoming selfish. You are just finally being fair to yourself. One no does not undo all the kindness you have offered. It does not cancel out all the times you showed up, helped out, gave more than you had. Sometimes the people around us react badly when we say no. That can make the guilt feel even heavier. When someone is disappointed, frustrated, or even angry with you, it is hard not to feel like you caused that. But here's something important to understand. Other people are responsible for their own reactions. If someone cannot handle hearing no, that is information about them, not about you. Healthy relationships include space for no. They include room for honesty, for limits, for individual needs. If someone only values you when you are saying yes, that is not respect, that is expectation, and you deserve more than that. It's also worth recognizing that saying no does not mean you don't care. You can love someone and still decline their request. You can want to help and still recognize that you can't right now. You can wish things were different and still hold your boundary. These things are not opposites. They exist at the same time. In fact, sometimes saying no is the most caring thing you can do. If you say yes when you are exhausted, resentful, or overwhelmed, you are not really giving your best. You are giving what is left over. But if you say no, take care of yourself, and come back later with real energy and presence, that is often worth more.
You do not owe anyone a version of yourself that is running on empty. Here is something that often goes unnoticed. The people who feel guilty for saying no usually do not say no easily. They think about it carefully. They worry about the impact. They consider the other person's feelings before making a decision. That is not the behavior of someone who does not care. That is the behavior of someone who cares deeply. So if you are the kind of person who agonizes over every no, who loses sleep over small boundaries, who replays conversations looking for proof that you were kind enough, I want you to know something. You are not the problem. You are someone who has been taught that your worth depends on how much you give. And that teaching was never true. Your worth is not measured by your usefulness. It is not tied to how convenient you are for other people. You are valuable because you exist, because you have your own thoughts and feelings and needs, not because you always say yes. It takes time to really believe that, and that is okay. You do not have to feel completely free of guilt by the time you finish listening to this. You do not have to have it all figured out. What matters is that you are starting to see things differently. You are noticing the pattern. You are questioning whether the guilt is telling you the truth. That is already a step, a quiet one maybe, but still real.
There will be moments when you say no and the guilt will show up anyway. That is normal. Let it be there without letting it change your decision. You can feel guilty and still stand by what you said.
You can feel uncomfortable and still know that you did the right thing for yourself. Over time, the guilt will have less power over you. It might not disappear completely, but it will feel smaller, lighter, easier to carry. You will start to trust yourself more. You will start to notice that saying no does not ruin relationships, does not make you a bad person, does not lead to disaster. It simply creates space. Space for you to breathe. Space for you to rest. Space for you to show up in the ways that truly matter. You are allowed to take up that space. And if no one has told you this before, let me say it clearly now. You are not selfish for having limits. You are not cold for protecting your peace. You are not wrong for choosing yourself sometimes. You are just learning what so many people forget, that taking care of yourself is not a betrayal of others. It is the foundation that allows you to care for anyone at all. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle. You do not need to feel different right now. You do not need to fix anything. You just needed someone to say what you have been feeling is understandable. And it is.